This podcast is brought to you by the Ministry of ICT and Innovation in partnership with GIZ and the Digital Transformation Center Rwanda. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Tech Decoded and welcome to those who are new here. My name is Sarah and today's conversation is one I'm super excited about. As you can see, I'm not in studio alone today. I'm joined by Roger Mizero and Alice Higiro. Roger is representing Ministry of Environment. He's the CDO of Ministry of Environment. And Alice Higiro is the Program Director of Smart Cities at the Ministry of ICT. And today's conversation is all about smart cities. We're trying to tackle some of the misconceptions that you may have, such as, for instance, like what the smart cities actually do. Some people think it's all about, say, flying cars or robots or anything else. And it is about that, sure, eventually, but where are we right now in Rwanda when it comes to the Smart Cities initiative?
Thank you for having us.
Okay,
very happy to be here. So smart city is really the flying cars, the robots, all of that, the high tech that you see is always there for one purpose and one purpose only, is to make the life of a person or an individual or a citizen easier, more convenient, and more effective, more efficient in everything that you do. So all the technologies you can think that are out there are there to help you do something if you think about it. That email is there to help you to easily communicate with Roger. And that Irembo is there to help you get that service that you're looking for. So really Smart Cities is about that, is about bringing all these technologies together to generate data that communicates a certain message that says, for example, the population is looking for more self-driven cars, or the population is looking for something. The data always tells a story. So that's what Smart Cities is about, using all these technologies that we see around to improve the life of a citizen, to make it more convenient and services more accessible.
Interesting. Roger, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you very much. Something I didn't tell you, I'm also the CDO for the Ministry in charge of emergency management.
I feel like you need to say what it is, what a CDO is.
Please.
Yeah.
My apologies.
That's fine.
Obviously, my introduction can't encapsulate everything that you do. For the work that you do is incredible. But please give us your introduction. Like, what exactly do you do, and how broad does it go?
Well, so as I said, I'm the CDO for two ministries, and environment and also emergency management. And the role of a CDO is to drive the digital transformation of that particular sector. So that means moving from using ICT as a tool, but also using it as an enabler for the transformation that a country wants. For example, if I talk about climate change, what are the solutions that speaks to climate change that the IT or the emerging technology can bring? If we talk about disaster management, what are the technologies? For example, remote sensing, AI. How can they help in reducing the disasters, early warning? So that's the job of a CDO.
Yeah.
Now back to the question about smart cities. There is another aspect that can be missed, which is sustainability.
Correct.
So you need to look at whatever you're doing has to align with, is sustainable. Are you using the resources efficiently? Are you managing, for example, energy? What kind of energy are we trying to use in the smart city? And it has to be balanced and more green.
Yeah, I love that. And we're going to get into that. I'll definitely pose those questions back to you. So before we get to the meat of the conversation, there's a segment that we have called Busting Myths. And I have 3 or so myths that I want to propose to both of you. And you let me know if it's fact or if it's fiction. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Perfect. So the first myth that we have is smart cities are just about expensive futuristic tech that most people can't afford or easily navigate.
False.
False?
False.
So fiction.
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
Because just as we both just shared, is smart city is there to serve, to make life easier, more convenient, services more accessible and cheaper to actually access. And so it's not about high tech. Actually, when you think about smart city, it's not always about technology. It's also about innovation. How do we do something differently than we were doing it, but in a more efficient manner, in a more environmentally friendly manner? And a quick example is, how do I separate my waste? I'm not using any technology with that. I'm just being intentional in finding out this is organic waste, this is inorganic waste or recyclable waste. So putting it, I can use a bucket back at home. I can use a sack. We do that here in the Rwandan context, right? So that's not necessarily a technology, but it's smart cities and it's sustainable.
Interesting. Love that. Okay.
Yeah. So it's more of a mindset change rather than technology. Because when you look at traditional cities, they favor those who have money. But for example, let's talk about transport. Public transport is a feature of smart cities. Efficient public transport. So if it's not efficient, then those who have cars,
they're
they will
thriving.
get their way around. But those who don't have cars, they won't. So it's I would say it's actually for everybody, especially those who don't have the means.
Yes.
Okay. That kind of builds upon the next question, the next myth, which is if a city becomes too smart, it means fewer jobs for people because AI and robots will take their jobs.
False.
False, but with
Yes.
but yes.
Yes.
But
I think that, personally, I think that it takes also the intention of the leadership in also looking at, for example, one principle we have in some of the projects that we lead is how do we not eliminate jobs, but rather enhance them, right? So if you think about drones, for example, where people were going to go dig into mines to figure out if the ground is stable. If you can send a drone in there, if you can send a robot in there, you're protecting the life of those, the miners, you've heard of how many accidents they experience, right? So if we're sending a robot there to do the initial inspection on their behalf, and then they go in there when they know that the ground is stable enough or safe enough for me to go there. So we've not really eliminated their job. We've reduced some of the work that they were doing that was exposing them to risk, but really enabling some of their work, making it easier, maybe faster. Some of the heavily manual work is being, if we shift it towards robots, maybe. You saw how we used the robots during COVID-19 to do the initial patient interface of taking their temperatures. So we were protecting lives, right? Well, not me, but the Ministry of Health was protecting the lives of the nurses and the healthcare workers, right? So I think it takes an intentional move to see how do we, because it can eliminate jobs. It can completely replace us in different ways, but it takes the intention of the leadership in saying this is how we limit it. For example, having the AI guidelines, ethical guidelines that say this is how AI will be used. We will use people's information in this way. Every person will know how their data is being used and things like that. So it takes intention, but if that intention is not there, then elimination of jobs and our relevance as a people at some point could easily run out. I think we've seen this also in fictional movies.
Yeah, 100%, which is why people are scared about it. But it's good to know that Rwanda's leadership is kind of different and making sure that, yes, some jobs might be replaced, but then also new jobs can come up, like creative jobs and jobs that require more thoughtfulness behind them and whatnot. There's a final one, which is on whether or not Rwanda is ready for smart cities. The myth says that we don't have the infrastructure or the funding that's needed for us to achieve this smart cities initiative. Fact? Kind of?
False. Or neutral.
Okay.
Ish.
It's false for me.
Yeah.
Ooh, a debate. Okay, love it.
Okay. Do you want to
go
jab
first?
at it
Yeah,
first?
so I'll say that first. Rwanda is smart.
Already.
So we are on a good trajectory in being smart.
Yeah.
And if you look at the work that has been done, for example, let's say in the services, digitizing services, I can't say it took a lot of money. It only took, we did it with some funds. I can't say it's a lot, but when you look at how it transformed
The results are
the
higher.
results are higher than the investment.
Yes.
And again, there are different aspects.
Yeah.
And most of aspects don't require a lot of money. Rwanda cannot be, for example, like Kigali cannot be like Singapore. But in its own way, again, coming to the definition, making life of a citizen easier,
Yeah.
and more enjoyable. I think I would say it doesn't require that much funds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially considering what you were talking about, how innovation or efficiency doesn't necessarily mean high tech, you know?
Absolutely.
In that regard, then we don't need too much funding. But also when you talk about the readiness, sure, Rwanda's government might be ready and some of the citizens might be ready, but are we really ready to take up some of like the most smart stuff, like for instance, the no road traffic control like by police? Yeah, I've seen something in Japan where they don't really have that many like traffic police officers because their traffic system is
It's
like
fully
spot
digital
on.
almost,
Yes, but is this something that, let's say, my grandma will be able to navigate when they're walking around the streets, or will she actually get into an accident? Like, are the citizens actually ready for some of these innovations, some of these high tech smart cityfication of Kigali, like, or we turn Rwanda into the Singapore of Africa, as they say it. Like, are we ready in that regard?
I think readiness is also subjective or contextual.
Yeah.
So when sometimes this is actually an issue we've also had in the past of saying when you're looking for research on smart cities, there's limited research in the context of Africa, and most of the use cases and the proven technologies are mostly based on Asian cities or European cities, a lot of those two continents especially. Yeah. And so we have to define, actually globally there are over 3,000 definitions of what smart cities are. And that's because people take it and contextualize it to what it means for them. For our people, for our population in Rwanda, what does smart look like? What does that mean? For us, it's to start with Irembo, for example, or having a national ID. We have 99% coverage of national ID. A lot of countries, even in countries like the UK, for example, not to be quoted, but I had this in a conversation with someone that they don't have the national ID, right? So, but if you think of all the services you get in Rwanda, they're mostly based on your national ID. So that's a smart thing, right, for us. So the readiness should be contextualized in that sense of like, because the same way you're not going to carry the DLR, I forget what it's called in London, the driverless train, right? If you bring it here, maybe right now it's not relevant for us. We have hilly terrain. Yeah. We need a flat surface for the DLR to be able to work. So how do we? Is that relevant for Rwanda right now?
Probably not.
Probably not. Do the people care about it? Maybe not. Will they be able to afford it? Maybe not. But if we do bicycle lanes, relevant, right? So I think you've seen the bicycle lanes. At first, when those were coming up, even I asked myself, I was like, Rwandans, especially women, we are not known to ride bicycles in public. People, what's the uptake going to be like? So when I had a chat one time with a company that was running the bicycles, they told us actually the demand is much higher than the supply they're able to give, right? Yeah, so they had a ridership of almost like 80 bikes per day, or 100, sorry, and they had planned for 80. So now they had pressure to actually increase the supply. And so you look at that and you think, okay, so readiness or the smart cities definition has to be localized. And then I agree with Roger in terms of the investment that he was talking about. A lot of these things don't need like heavy investment in that sense or heavy capital, but a lot of smart cities solutions are also infrastructure based, and infrastructure is always going to be expensive. But the how as well, the solutions, the approaches of how we do that. Also, we talk about in our space, we always talk about this at work, that we have to enable the private sector to be able to take lead on this. Government is not going to always do everything, right? Yes. Government heavily relies on a good partnership with the private sector because they have the solutions, they have the money, they have the skills, they have the time, right? And so if government can focus on the policy and creating an enabling environment, then the private sector is able to run this. Actually, most countries that you see where smart cities is pretty advanced, it's countries where the private sector is able to thrive.
I 100% agree. Now, Roger, how about like the Ministry of Environment? Like, how exactly are you easing our lives, like in the day to day?
Yes. So the Ministry of Environment has two portfolios. There's natural resource management. There's also environment and climate change. Natural resources, it's, for example, land.
Yeah.
Land is a big asset. And everyone in Rwanda loves land. So if you look at, disputes, family disputes, everything, it revolves around
land
asset.
yes.
And one thing that the ministry has done through the National Land Authority is, digitizing services, land services, but also making it paperless. Now, we introduced an electronic land title 2 years ago with some reservation that the citizen is not going to like it. But we're proven wrong.
Nice.
Because
I
we
like
actually gave option of, if you want to print, you can come, they print for you. Nobody came for printing.
no way.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like
So
Wow.
one person.
not even one person.
But
We
what
had-
about
we
the
had to
older
cancel-
generation, like
Yeah.
she was
We
saying?
had to cancel the contract
What?
for printing because nobody was coming for
to
printing.
print.
No one was
Wait,
coming
Roger,
to
I want
print
to ask
their
about
titles.
what you asked
Yeah.
about the older
Yeah.
generation,
Yeah.
right? Who are not
That's
usually.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So I just realized that Rwandan are more ready than we think. I give examples. Who remember when, like, during in the transport, we used to have,
Cash.
convoyeur,
Yes.
conductors.
Yes.
And at some point, they were removed. Now we are tapping. Like, you have the...
Tap and go.
It was, like, almost seamless. Remember about the Sophia.
Yes. The speed enforcement
The
cameras.
speed enforcement.
still have
The
issues
first
with
time I
that.
heard it on radio,
Yeah.
that a camera would be checking your speed and sending you a ticket.
Yeah.
I didn't believe it.
Didn't
But
make sense.
now I just get a text like, your speed was
Over.
over. Then I just pay. There's a lot of examples like cashless, Momo. If you just get a text from the bank, you don't question whether it's actually real money. You know it's real money.
True.
Everyone knows.
Well, I see the zeros.
So
It's real
it's,
money. Yeah.
I think our citizens are ready for this kind
absolutely.
of technology.
Okay.
Yeah, including the land title. So
Okay. You mentioned something about the bus systems, and this is something I know a lot of young people have issues with. The more motos we have, and the more young people have to buy cars, the more emission of pollution. It does become your problem, because at the end of the day, if everyone uses personal transportation, then where do we stand?
I think
Yeah.
what Roger was saying is from a tech perspective, to develop a solution that helps you track a bus is the easiest part. The technology is always the easiest part, but the processes behind that will enable that technology to actually function well are the ones that take quite a process. A quick example is the recent investment that was made by the city of Kigali, MINEMA, and the bus operators to increase the fleet of buses on the road. I think you've all seen that in the last few years, there's been an increase of buses. We have the blue ones. I don't even know what they're called. The Yutong, I think.
Yeah.
And then we have the older blue-greenish ones. So that's the beginning was to also start by let's increase the fleet of buses on the road so that there are less waiting times. I think I used to see in the evening when going home a lot of students on a very long queue, and I wonder how long does this queue last? And in some conversations I had with people, some people stood there for 2 hours before they actually could board a bus, because every time it came, it was handling the first half of the queue, then the middle, and then, so increasing the number of vehicles, buses, for example, was a good start. And then I know that the city of Kigali also, I think at the start of this year, created bus lanes, dedicated bus lanes. So to also have predictable bus schedules, you need to be able to know this is exactly how much time it takes for bus one to go from point A to B to C to Z, right? So without dedicated bus lanes, this is very difficult to achieve, because the bus will come and get stuck in traffic like the rest of us, and then he's going to wait an hour. By the time he gets to the final point, everyone is already frustrated. So really beginning with by creating the dedicated bus lanes is also another stepping stone. So I think that it's a gradual process. It takes a lot of, I know also the relevant institutions have done a very lengthy study around that, because there's the economics behind, there are the processes, and then also public transport is, although regulated by the government, operated by the private sector.
Yeah.
So the readiness of those operators as well to bring new fleets and also eco-friendly, buses. I think the Basigo, you've seen those, are electric. So it's a lot of moving pieces that it's not an overnight thing. There are processes in place and there are things that are being done, like the examples we've just shared. And
That's
I think there's
beautiful.
something else around emissions, carbon emissions.
Yeah,
to
I was
that
just
question.
about to ask that. Okay, how about then we address the issue of like resource use or conservation? How is the Smart Cities program, like at least in its stages right now, how is it addressing the resource use as well as conservation for Rwanda? Like, especially considering how rapidly evolving it is, we're constantly, urbanization is all around us basically. We're moving fast. So how are you keeping up when it comes to conservation efforts?
Yes. So I first I start with, for example, energy. There are different programs. I don't know if you have seen that most motors are getting electric, are becoming electric.
Yeah.
So there's a program for retrofitting, even the normal ones to electric motor, and there are different charging stations around the city. But also, there is some incentives being put on electric cars and transport, like some waiving of tax. So those are some of the initiative aiming to curb the growing of emission. There is a new service coming of emission, measuring emission from the vehicle, like same way you go for
control technique.
A control technique.
Yes.
You at the same place you also get a service for your car or for your vehicle, even including
I'm
motor.
looking forward to that.
Like to understand just how much carbon emission comes from my car?
There are different emissions that come from the vehicles. So they will test for you, then give you recommendations. The same way you can.
So sometimes I see like a truck in front of me and I see all these black fumes and I'm like, did this guy go for control technique?
Exactly.
But that means, so in the past that emissions were not being measured, but now they're going to be measured. So should I be found that my car has very high emissions, what do the authorities tell me
Then
beyond a recommendation?
You not get the same way, like
You don't get clearance.
You don't get clearance. So I think they are going to set thresholds.
Okay.
So if you are below the threshold, then you won't get the clearance.
Nice.
Okay.
So these are initiatives. At least educating people that you need to take care of your vehicle. It might not be the black fume, but there are also other emissions.
Yeah. Okay. As we near the end of this conversation, I want to kind of hear from you what you think what you wish more people would know about the Smart Cities Initiative, specific to the Ministry of Environment, but then also general to the Smart Cities Initiative. Like, what have we not talked about that you wish more people knew about? Too big?
Well, so I will still talk about efficiency and also sustainability. Our country is small. That's a fact.
Yeah.
And our population keeps growing. So if we don't adopt efficiency in everything we do, including land use, how we build, we should be building going up. And also making our space green, and also producing food. In the future, if we keep building everywhere, then we are not going to find
enough land for farming.
Yeah, so we need to balance that. Yes, we need to build, but we also need to do other things.
Yeah. Love it. Alice?
I'll come back to the issue of waste management, because this is a huge deal in smart cities and sustainability. Like you said earlier, smart cities now does not focus globally, by the way. It does not focus on digital transformation anymore alone, but it's also the green transformation. So they call it a twin transition. So how do we go digital but also green? And so these things, we don't separate them. So it also can start with me at my house. It doesn't have to be, oh, the ministry has done this, the transport sector is not doing that. It could be me, what am I responsible for? And to begin with, the smallest thing is your waste, the waste in your house. How can I separate that waste? And we did a survey a few years ago and interviewed over 15,000 homes in Rwanda, in Kigali, sorry. And we were asking people, are they aware about waste segregation, for example? And to our surprise, 49% of the people actually knew about segregation, and they were practicing it already, especially on the peripherals of the city. And so we asked them, what do you use the organic waste for? And a lot of them, or the compost, a lot of them say they were using it for kitchen gardens, which was a very surprising thing and very pleasant to find out. And so we realized that, should we demystify this? Should we encourage the population, tell them these are the acceptable ways, these are the mechanisms that are actually healthy for you? Because not every compost also should be going into your garden. We realized that if we do that awareness training, then people are actually open to do it, because people care about their own health as well, right? And so I would say that we all have a responsibility at an individual level, as a collective, as a society. And I think that Rwanda has done an amazing job. I mean, the fact that we all do muganda, we all know I don't eat my banana and throw the peel out of my window. That's impeccable, right? So being aware of not littering, being aware of my fumes, and being responsible that the fumes that are coming from my car are really toxic to me, to the next person, and all these things. So it's just looking at, yes, there is the bigger smart cities, but there are smaller things that I can do in my day-to-day practice.
Okay. And really quickly, you did mention that the private sector does have a lot of work to do. Is there any big pain point or big gap that the private sector should be trying to fill?
So I think some of the discussions we've had with the private sector before is that we've seen situations where they see this fantastic solution in Singapore, and now I must bring it to Rwanda, with zero research, with no data backing that up, and then they come and the solution flops. It flops because there was no information backing that up. So a lot of market intelligence and research was lacking. And so then we realized, okay, there's the part of the private sector maybe not doing their homework, but there was also the public sector not availing some information, or in some instances, maybe the information is there, but the private company does not know, where do I knock? Is it Roger's office that I go knocking, or is it Alice's office, or is it Sarah's office? So, and I think that the government has been doing a lot of work on creating data portals, the land dashboard that Roger was talking about. And so bridging that gap of information sharing, because there's a lot of misinformation or lack of information to begin with. There's a lot of information that private sector holds and a lot of information that the government holds. So just creating those linkages is really a huge gap. And I think that it's a game changer when we develop solutions that for our actual problems, not just some copy paste that I'm doing.
Roger?
So the government does provide a lot of, I call them pillars or enablers. But the last mile, linking those pillars to the citizen should be the private sector. And I challenge them to really take them. For example, the mobility issue. I think the private sector can solve it better if they go into it. The service part, the government has really invested a lot.
And so direct them directly to you? Do they come to the Ministry of Environment to ask you about which gaps that you have and what exactly you want them to solve? Or do they how then do we address that so that we're not building just based off of vibes?
Well, so it's going to take a bit of education, but also, having good policies that help them, solve those problems. But they have the expertise, and for them it means money. So they should have those incentives to
the
innovate.
motivation.
Yes, the government, for example, the government provides access to data. They can look at the data and see opportunities where they can innovate. We talk about private, but also forget about academia, the role of academia in bringing these solutions. The reason why academia is key is not every solution works in every place.
That's true.
So it has to be contextualized, researched about. Some of the solutions can take 10 to 15 years in research. But when you get that solution, it fits exactly that context.
Okay.
So I also challenge the academia, our academia, to also, embrace these challenges, smart challenges that we currently have, that we've been trying to solve, maybe in a different context. Because I believe the ones which failed, we just try to copy paste something that works somewhere, and it didn't work in our context.
I love this.
So we need to challenge them and innovate.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I feel like this conversation has been super insightful. Then also I feel like that challenge definitely goes straight to the private sector, in the sense that instead of just building off of vibes, build data-driven solutions, Don't just build
an example to that, sorry to cut you short. Just didn't want to miss this opportunity. For example, they could visit the website of the Ministry of Infrastructure. They've done a fantastic job at creating like problem statements, and they stated there, we have a problem of this, that, and it has a lot of data and information. And I think a lot of our ministry websites have policies, documents, and things that kind of shed light on these issues. So even starting with that and looking at what is the government actually currently prioritizing, because those priorities are not out of nowhere, right? They are coming from conversations and research and problems that have been collected from the community. So yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, but that's such a beautiful call to action. Visit all your ministries, whether it's the Ministry of Infrastructure, whether it's the Ministry of ICT, Ministry of Environment, you name it. All of them do have the policies in place. They do have the problem statements, and then they also have hints at which solutions are actually needed. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for being with us on Tech Decoded, and stay innovative.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the Ministry of ICT and Innovation in partnership with GIZ and the Digital Transformation Center Rwanda.